Hi. So at my school, we have a total of 8 ELL students. Because of our ELL population, our school does not carry an actual ESL class. So instead, students are placed on teams with ESL trained teachers and provided with remedial classes like reading to supplement their language development. This school year, I have only one ELL student who, for the purpose of this video, I will refer to as Student X. Student X is a 13-year-old refugee from Burundi, Africa, who speaks Swahili and very limited French. He arrived to Utah last year and was taken in by 2 other refugees who primarily speak French, but do have a basic understanding of English. The communication in their home is slowly progressing, but the linguistic incongruence is making development of his native language nearly impossible, and the development of English infinitely more difficult. Moreover, because the political, social, and social climate of his native country is so poor, his formal schooling was almost non-existent, and his ability to read or write in any language is greatly underdeveloped. As a result, learning to communicate in English has been a very complex process for this student. Student X has my class, which is an English language arts class, immediately after lunch. And every day when he arrives, he follows the same routine. So he picks up his materials from a basket, he submits any homework into a basket nearby, grabs his vocabulary book from a shelf that's labeled by period, grabs his computer if it is a necessary item that day, and then finds his seat, which is also assigned by number. Student X is very successful at following the procedures of the classroom because he pays careful attention to the behaviors of others, and he follows what they're doing very closely. He's also really proficient with recognizing numbers, so locating the baskets and the books and the computers and his desk is a fairly simple task for him. Once he's seated in his desk, though, his ability to understand or use English as a means of communication begins to make itself really apparent as a weakness. So unless there's a clear and obvious task or action that Student X needs to take, like getting out paper or moving into a group or something, he spends most of his time staring at the board, staring at me, looking very confused, until he can be given like a modified instruction with miming or gestures and pictures and things like that. So the first concrete example that I want to talk about occurred really early this year during a pre-class conversation in which I was trying to get to know Student X and get a handle on his English ability. When Student X arrived, he didn't have a WIDA report. He didn't have any sort of formal testing for his language, so we were really kind of guessing what his understanding of English was through conversations with him and conversations with the family. So during the course of this particular conversation, I asked Student X, what do you like to do for fun? To which he replied, souk. After some more questioning and miming, I was able to determine that souk was his attempt at saying the word soccer. After some more practice with the phonological parts of the word, he was able to achieve the word suker. And while I was very excited that he was able to pick up on that final morphemic R combination, I was also made aware of the fact that the vowel sound hadn't changed, despite the fact that was the part we had really stressed. And this led me to looking into kind of like his language, his native language of Swahili. And one of the things that I noticed as I saw him struggle over and over with vowel sounds was that in Swahili there are only 5 vowel phonemes. So there's U as in, or O as in or door, and A as in father, E as in egg, E as in bee, and U as in loop. So this contrast of 5 phonemic vowel sounds in relation to the relatively large number of vowel phonemes present in English was really a struggle for him. As a proficient English speaker, I can see the word soccer and apply the appropriate ah sound to the letter O. However, when Student X encounters an O in really any word, he applies the oo sound to that word. So as a result, soccer becomes suker, ocean becomes ocean, word becomes kind of like a woo word sound, and so on. So this same pattern is applied to every vowel that he sees and attempts to translate into speech within words he knows by sight, because he's a fairly decent reader. So in an attempt to help student X improve his pronunciation of words, namely the vowel portion of the words, because the meaning can be obscured when he mispronounces these words, we've been practicing different English phonemes, applying them to different words. So I believe that this process is working. Last week I asked him the same question, what do you like to do for fun? And he was able to reply to me that I lick Sauker, which is closer and still shy of perfect, but it is demonstrating for me that he's starting to understand that the vowel sounds in English do change even when the letters stay the same. So the second concrete example I want to talk about occurred 2 weeks ago with student X when we were discussing a writing assignment that he was working on. As I was assisting him in spelling the word the, I noticed that the student has a particularly difficult time figuring out which letters to use to represent the interdental voiced fricative th. So I assisted him with the spelling, and we continued on with the writing task. But a short time later, when he attempted to spell the word other, he ran into the same problem. So after a long pause, followed by his attempt, O-D-E-R, I again assisted him with spelling the word correctly. So this time we stopped to practice and say the word other with the correct pronunciation. And I noticed that he was saying the word, that as he was saying the word, that he was really having a difficult time voicing that interdental fricative. So instead of saying other, he was pronouncing that word as author. We practice voicing the in the word other as well as in other words like this and these and whether, but he had very limited success. So we also took some time to review other phonemes that are represented with more than one letter, like sh and ch. And these were more successful. And he was able to translate those into like their 2-letter parts in writing. But following that conversation, I did some investigating into Swahili again, and discovered that the voiced interdental fricative is transcribed using a D. So while this did explain his interesting letter choice, O-D-E-R, it didn't really help me understand why he had difficulty pronouncing the sound, because the sound does exist in his native language. So that was kind of an interesting contrast. But since this conversation, the student has gotten a lot better at remembering to use the TH letter combination when writing, but he is still finding it very difficult to voice that interdental fricative and create the th sound when speaking. So I've tried things like repeating those words, emphasizing that correct sound, but since this one doesn't really hinder his ability to communicate with others, and you can typically understand what he is still trying to communicate, it hasn't been a central focus for instruction. So this last concrete example is a written sample that occurred last week during a guided writing assignment. So during this assignment, student X was having a very hard, well, just in general, that student X has a really hard time stringing together more than 3 words at a time. And he has a really difficult time writing in Swahili as well. And so as a result, any sort of extended writing, like essays, are really kind of impossible at this point. But in an effort to accommodate for his needs as a student and still support him in his acquisition and enthusiasm for English, student X has been given modified writing assignments with English language lessons like kind of mixed in and incorporated. So for example, student X is allowed to first respond to any prompt in Swahili or French, whichever he decides is he's more comfortable with. And then he can formulate an answer that he's confident in. Then we take that response and we translate it using Google Translate into English. And then together we sit down and we talk about the arrangement of that sentence and the grammar, and so we can get a more precise and articulate answer. Other days, like in the example that I'm going to show or discuss, Student X and I will have a conversation where he can use the English that he's been practicing in class and practice those phrases both orally and then written. So in this example, he had gone through some flashcards of phrases in English on a Canvas course that I've designed that's just specific to him and kind of the words he's working with. So this week we were talking about our weekend, like how to just talk to his friends about his weekend and his plans and things. So I began with the question, what do you have planned for this weekend? And he responded with kind of an I know, I don't, and kind of just shook his head at me. Couldn't respond to that question. So we tried a different one. I said, that's okay. Let's try another one. What are you doing when you get home from school today? And he was more successful with this one. He says back to me, I am read. And so my response to him is, you're going to read? That's awesome. Can you try saying, I am going to read? And he got closer. He, responded with, I am gone to read. And so, I praise him, much better, thank you. Now let's try writing the same phrase, I am going to read, on your paper. So because this phrase was kind of a longer phrase, I kept repeating as he's spelling, as he's writing out these words, until we had gotten all the way through the whole phrase. So the final written product is... So the process to getting to this result took a considerable amount of time, but it's a generally successful process in getting him to write down what he's communicating. And while there are definitely some issues, it's at least decipherable. So during this particular writing session, we were able to produce, by the end of the period, a pretty extended piece of writing, which looked like this. So there are several aspects of the Student X's writing that immediately jump out to me as being problematic. So first, his writing shows some very prevalent and surprising inconsistent syntax errors. He misuses or completely misses prepositions in some sentences, like I'm going to read until 3:30 p.m., and his verb conjugation is highly inconsistent. So while he uses in one sentence, next is playing, he's able to, in almost the next sentence, say, I will wake up. Like his sporadic syntax, his morphemic awareness is irregular. So, for example, he uses the suffix ending ing in the word playing, but not on the word cleaning. He also combines words like then go as the go, or will go as will go. Finally, there are a number of words where his lack of phonemic awareness is highlighted in his spelling. So, for example, the word sleep he spells as silp, S-E-E-L-P, or the word skateboard he writes as two separate words, ski, S-K-E, and then board spelled appropriately. So the final pattern problem that I see is, and that I imagine is closely related to his difficulty interpreting and separating out sounds and words, is that his propensity to combine phonemes from multiple words into one word. So, for example, the phrase, I am going to, which he successfully uses in conversation, consistently becomes O-N-G-A-N, one word, ongen, in his writing. So, in the end, while we're still right at the beginning of learning English and we still have a lot of problems that we're going to try and tackle, I do think that Student X is moving forward in his acquisition of English at a fairly predictable and reasonable rate. So we're slowly adding new noun phrases and verb phrases to his sentence structures, and I'm seeing a lot more success as we continue through the writing process, but obviously still a long way to go.